Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight, better off. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight, won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy face? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight, better off. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight, won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me? What makes this happy face do? Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight, better off. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight, won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrow. Won't you talk to me? We'll make a new tomorrow. Won't you talk to me?
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't mean for that to go for almost 4 minutes for an intro, but it happens. Anyway, let's get into our next articles. So, we are on articles 21 and 22 tonight. The first one is National Secrets. The Truth Might Be Stranger Than Any Fiction by Stephen Sora. So, yeah. I don't have anything else to say, so I'm just going to jump into it. The reviews are in for National Treasure, Hollywood's take on the esoteric origins of America, starring Nicolas Cage. The critics hated it, but the good news is that the public loved it. The story centers on Ben Gates, Cage, a descendant of one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. The signers, it seems, may have left more than a blueprint for democracy on the Declaration. America's founders, led by Freemasons, had, the movie suggests, hidden an actual treasure, indeed the legendary treasure of the mysterious Knights Templar. To this day, Freemasons consider themselves to be the heirs of the Templars. The treasure, though according to historical accounts had its origin even before the Templars are said to have carried it home to France from Jerusalem after the Crusades. It is said that only a handful of men, the film purports that these included the founding fathers, once knew of the treasure, and only by correctly interpreting many mysterious signs and symbols could its location be uncovered. In the movie, the most important clue is a map on the back of America's most sacred and protected document, the original Declaration of Independence. The fact that the reaction of film critics goes against popular opinion should come as no surprise, but it is interesting to examine just why they chose to pan such an overwhelmingly popular film. Our critic argued that no serious historian has ever believed that there was a Templar treasure. We beg to differ. The Templar treasure is no myth. During the persecution of the Templars in the 14th century, strong evidence of the treasure's existence was part of actual court testimony in at least one Templar trial. In contrast to their French counterparts, British proceedings against the Templars never took on a hysterical tone. The English trials, in fact, were quite orderly and free from the fantastic accounts of devil worship and spitting on the cross that had become familiar features of continental trials. Even the use of torture was minimal, and then only as a result of pressure from the Church and the French king. In England, the record reveals that knowledgeable and influential figures testified that just before the Friday the 13th, 1307 raid that destroyed their organization, the Templars had been warned of the king's warrants. It is no secret that before the raid, the Templars had served as virtual world bankers, receiving deposits of treasure from the rich in many locales and issuing payments on demand drawn on those deposits in other locations. While scholars may question the existence of the Templar treasure, it is clear that the raiders of their strongholds failed to find it. This begs the question, what actually happened to the vast deposits that the Templars certainly held? According to the testimony, upon receiving warning of the pending raids, the knights feverishly loaded all of the valuables in their care onto a hastily assembled wagon train and quickly and quietly transported the immense hoard, the holdings of what was then the only bank of the world, to the French port city of La Rochelle. There the treasure was loaded onto ships of the Templar fleet, the largest in the world. From La Rochelle, many believe the fleet sailed to the one place a fugitive order could find protection, the free nation of Scotland, where the upstart king Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated for declaring his country's independence. The outlaw order seeking protection and the outlawed nation in sore need of ships and knights established a mutually rewarding relationship. Very soon, at the greatest battle in Scottish history, Bannockburn, the fugitive Templars proved their value. Just as English forces appeared to be sweeping the field, a fresh cadre of knights charged from the forest and routed the enemy. It was the feast day of St. John, patron saint of the Templars, destined to remain the date of their last great victory in the field. They soon went underground, concealing their true identity behind the Masonic mask. When James VI of Scotland was crowned King James II of England, the Scottish family at the heart of the Templars, the Sinclairs, was rewarded with the title and responsibility of hereditary guardians of Freemasonry. The honor would be confirmed again in 1601. The Sinclairs had protected the treasure since it was brought to their estate at Roslin and would protect the order as well. In the 14th century, as anti-Catholic sentiment led to attacks on churches and the destruction of long-preserved relics, it is believed that the Sinclairs grew concerned about the possible threats to the immense but secret treasure in their possession. Once again, almost a century before Columbus crossed the Atlantic, the vast cache was moved, this time apparently to Nova Scotia. In most of America, the story of the first Sinclair voyage to the New World in 1398 is taken lightly. Not so in Nova Scotia, where in Guysborough a statue of Henry Sinclair remains a testament to belief in the voyage. Further corroboration comes from maps and charts from this early Atlantic crossing, which were used by Gerardus Mercator in preparing his own maps and by Martin Behaim in producing his globe. The second criticism of the movie National Treasure was that there is no evidence of any treasure ever being pinpointed by secret symbols placed strategically for others to follow. Wrong again. Once the Templar treasure was safely stashed away in a massive vault complex deep underground on a small island in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, the Sinclairs built Roslyn Chapel. Carved in stone on Masonic pillars in the church are depictions of American maize, corn, and aloe. A hidden vault beneath the chapel long concealed the resting place of Sinclairs who had fought as Templars. Skull and bones and markings on tombs signified that only bones were needed for resurrection. Crossed legs meant that the deceased had been a Templar. Across the ocean in Nova Scotia were still more clues. Oaks were planted on what would be called Oak Island to distinguish it from other small islands in the bay. Today the island has become a focus of sensational worldwide media speculation over the purpose of a gigantic and as of yet unexplained shaft, the full content of which remains a mystery. The Money Pit. For 50 years, Oak Island has been owned by two men who do not see eye to eye. Fred Nolan, a surveyor, discovered numerous symbols, including a 10-foot equilateral triangle with a cross in the middle. Before anyone could decipher its meaning, Nolan realized it was part of an even larger triangle. Within the area, he found drilled rocks with metal ring bolts and a heart-shaped rock within another smaller triangle. Another formation was made up of 10-ton granite boulders, again forming a cross, its intersection being a skull-shaped rock showing evidence of artificial construction. The other side of the island, the location of the notorious Money Pit, is owned by David Tobias. Excavation of the shaft began before 1800 with the discovery of flagstones at a 3-foot level and then every 10 feet a layer of oak planking. 90 feet below the surface, an elaborate booby trap has persistently flooded the shaft and for more than a century has thwarted the dreams of treasure hunters to dig further down. Even after it was determined just how the shaft was flooded, the advanced hydraulics of the ancient builders have continued to defy modern excavators. Is there a treasure-laden vault under the small island? Both men still believe there is, and despite their advanced age, they continue to work to get it to the surface. Tobias is considering a new proposal for a massive shaft that will miss nothing in expanding the original Money Pit shaft. The price tag would be $15 million, adding considerably to the $5 million he is said to have spent already. Nolan has brought in his son-in-law and recently purchased a nearby island and its treasure rights. Oak Island's Money Pit, though, is not the only potential repository of wealth and secrets in the Americas. Virginia's Brutton Vault. In colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, lies the Brutton Vault. It too is connected to a secretive group with connections to the Templar Masonic heritage. The vault itself is in one of the most visited American family destinations. Here, the original settlement has been restored and developed into a major park. For many, it is a great alternative to the hustle of nearby Six Flags, and an opportunity for Americans young and old to gain a sense of their history. Few know that it conceals an unusual secret, one that no visitor will ever see. The secret is that more than one of the most significant items reputed to be part of the Templar treasure may have been hidden under the original Jamestown church. These items are believed to include works by Sir Francis Bacon as well as the Ark of the Covenant, said to have been brought to France by the early Templars from Jerusalem. What could these celebrated artifacts be doing under the Jamestown Church? The fact is that the history of England's colonial origins in America has been altered, largely to fit into an acceptable Orthodox framework. The true history borders on the bizarre. Perhaps the greatest secret influence behind the persuasion of Queen Elizabeth to join the French and Spanish in racing to the New World was a mysterious man by the name of Dr. John Dee. The mysterious Dr. G was a magician and an astrologer, as well as a scientist on a level with the great Copernicus. His tricks of levitation, experiments with alchemy, and his magic mirror brought suspicion upon him. He was booted out of school for actually levitating items on stage during a school play. For a while, he was even forced out of England, but he did come to have the Queen of England as his protector. When Elizabeth took the throne, she relied on Dee's ability to read the stars and to see the future, calling on him to choose the date and time of her coronation. His influence on the Queen and the history of England is both incalculable and rarely mentioned. He coined the term Britannia, planned the Royal Navy, and convinced Elizabeth that sacred England owned the seas. He also convinced her that she was a lineal descendant of Arthur, who went westward when he suffered his possibly mortal wounds. As a result of King Arthur's voyage to the west, Dee argued England and the Queen had the right to America. She granted him a patent to all the lands north of 50 degrees latitude. If it had just been England's mad monk influencing Elizabeth, the country might not have taken the course it did in the history of the New World, but Dee had Sir Francis Bacon in his corner. Bacon wrote The New Atlantis and urged Elizabeth along. The new colony was to be founded by the Virginia Company, named ostensibly for England's Virgin Queen. It had less to do with her than with a virgin goddess older than Christianity. The flag of the state of Virginia shows the goddess Athena, known as Minerva to the Romans, holding a sword and spear and standing with one foot on the chest of her vanquished enemy. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was nicknamed the Spear Shaker, a war goddess like Poseidon, the Earth Shaker. Even operating under the permission of the Queen, Bacon and others envisioned a world where monarchy and religion had no power. While other adventurers and merchants joined the bandwagon, colonization for Dee and Bacon was a divine mission. Bacon's writings on the subject of such an Arcadian paradise were a long-held theme in war-torn Europe. To keep the Queen as his patron, he wrote under the name of a butcher's apprentice, William Shakespeare. While this might come as news to many, the Bacon as Shakespeare controversy is centuries old. The mystery of how an illiterate butcher's apprentice could have written on so many subjects from law to science, medicine, and history without the advantage of ever having owned a book has led many to suspect that he served as a beard for someone else. That's a quote-unquote beard for someone else. Within the confines of a brief article, it is impossible to cover this subject fairly, but suffice it to say that 400 books have been written on the topic. Authors have included Benjamin Disraeli and Walt Whitman. The original Shakespearean manuscripts, it is said, as well as some Bacon texts, were brought to America. Francis Bacon didn't survive long enough to enjoy the lands granted to him, but his family was well represented. However, in 1676 the Bacon family found itself at odds with Virginia's government. Virginia was, after all, a royal colony, and Bacon represented an anti-government philosophy. In the year of Bacon's rebellion, as the history books recall, the contents under the Jamestown church were moved and placed in a 10 by 10 foot vault 20 feet below the tower of the Brutton Parish Church in Williamsburg. Nevertheless, despite the efforts, legal and borderline illegal, of modern researchers and other groups, the secrets of the vault remain secure, at least for now. The Knights of the Golden Circle. It is over a century since an impoverished parish priest in Rennes-le-Château, France, tracked clues to an astonishing amount of money, a case made famous by the books Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and The Da Vinci Code. But much more recently, American treasure hunters have followed signs and symbols to caches of money hidden across the South and even in the West. National treasure? Not exactly, as the stashes were part of a plan to keep the Confederacy alive during and even after Lee surrendered at Appomattox. Why do I not know that word? I don't recall ever seeing that before in my life. It's a place name, but anyway. Researchers Warren Gettler and Bob Brewer describe a series of esoteric graffiti that include reference to biblical passages, dates, and coded letters, all serving to signal the way to secret stashes. The small hoards were buried by groups of Masons and by the Knights of the Golden Circle, a group whose members were often recruited through Masonic lodges. Hidden in plain sight. Although National Treasure was confined to 2 hours, the film did manage to make references to some deep secrets. On the desk of one of its characters, Abigail Chase, is David Oveson's book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital. I might actually have that. I'll have to look. While it is known that the city of Washington was laid out according to Masonic geometry, Oveson points out that there are numerous zodiacs built into both the plan of the city and many of its buildings. One of the most intriguing clues in National Treasure is found on the back of a $100 bill. The clock tower points to a certain time of day, indicating its shadow will give the next direction. Here the movie makes a mistake. The treasure hunters had first thought they missed the critical moment, and then figured daylight savings time meant that they were just coming up on the moment. Daylight savings time, however, had been proposed by Franklin, but was not yet in effect when Independence Hall was built. The meaning of that critical time remains a secret. And that's the end of that article. So, yeah. I don't really have anything to add to that. I think I do have the Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital book. I also have one that's supposed to be on the secret symbolism of our money. I think specifically of the dollar bill, but it may cover more than that. Anyway, I have them here somewhere in my stacks of books. I don't know right off the top of my head where, but they're here. Anyway, let's get back to it. We'll jump into the next article. This one is Article 22, Bacon, Shakespeare, and the Spear of Athena. So, and this one's got a few pictures. So, excuse me. Occult Origins of England's Role in the New World, again by Stephen Sora. William Shakespeare, we are told, was born of illiterate parents, educated only through grade school, and apprenticed as a butcher's boy. 5 years after he got married, saddled with 3 children, he decided to leave his family and hometown for London. Once in the great city, he began writing plays and joined an established acting company that would perform them. His plays displayed knowledge of English, French, Greek, and Roman history, legal and medical principles, military and naval terms, falconry, horsemanship, and terms only used on the campus at Cambridge. In short, the plays exhibited everything outside of his realm of experience. After a long career, he headed home, where he put the sixth and last signature of his life on his will. His will left household items, including a bed, but no books, and, notably, no folio of work. His death received no notice either in Stratford or in London until years later. Writers are generally voracious readers, book lovers, diary keepers, and keepers of correspondence. The actual individual known as William Shakespeare, however, was the opposite. He most likely couldn't read or write, never owned a book, and never kept a diary, and it wasn't until long after his death that anyone got the idea to celebrate the playwright. It was also years after his death that a folio of his work was put together. This was not an original folio, as none of those is known to exist. Certainly the original plays were written and copied, yet none has ever surfaced. With such a large body of work, this is suspicious to say the least. Trying to put William Shakespeare in the role of the writer of his plays was and is impossible, and soon the effort attracted detractors. Walt Whitman, Mark Twain, John Greenleaf Whittier, Benjamin Disraeli, and Ralph Waldo Emerson among them, who believed Shakespeare himself could not have been the author. The man believed to be the bard was born in 1564. Queen Elizabeth I had been on the throne since January 15th, 1559, and ruled with a capricious but iron hand. On a whim, she would arrest or execute anyone from her court to her countryside. Her court included Sir Francis Bacon, born in 1561, Christopher Marlowe, born in 1564, Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, born in 1550, and Henry Wriothesley, I don't know that name, the Earl of Southampton, born in 1573. It was a full-time job keeping Elizabeth happy. Sir Walter Raleigh was sent to the Tower for impregnating one of her ladies-in-waiting. The Earl of Essex was punished for getting married a second time, and for his role in putting on the play Richard II was beheaded. Her physician, Rui, R-U-Y, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Lopez, was suspected of plotting against her and was drawn and quartered. Speaking freely had its price. None of William Shakespeare's plays included his name until 1598 and beyond. If producing Richard II was treason, then why was the writer allowed to go unpunished? It may have been that Essex was actually considered the author. Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, was also a candidate. He wrote plays, owned a theater, and had been to Italy. Oxford, some believe, faked his death on June 24, 1604. It was the feast day of St. John the Baptist, a sort of patron saint of esoteric knowledge. James I had 8 Shakespearean plays performed as a tribute to Oxford. And then there is a picture during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled from 1558 to 1603. England became a major European power. And there's a picture of Queen Elizabeth I. There we have it. There's several pictures throughout this. So, in fact, before I even start into the next part, I'll go ahead and show the next picture. The Globe Theatre in London, where many of Shakespeare's works were performed. It's a drawing, but interesting. Okay. While both Essex and Oxford were suitable candidates to have been the writer of the plays attributed to Shakespeare, with education and worldly knowledge, the most common candidate for the bard's works is Sir Francis Bacon. Although the prolific Bacon could not have written Richard II without fear of the chopping block, he did have the requisite knowledge attributed to the young butcher's apprentice. Bacon had studied at Cambridge, studied law at Gray's Inn, and was fluent in languages. He loved cryptology and had invented his own sophisticated code. He was also, many believe, a quiet homosexual who surrounded himself with handsome young men. One of these was Henry Wriothesley. In 1592, the first recorded Shakespearean play was dedicated to Henry. The sonnets, in which the poet speaks of his love for the youth, were also dedicated to Wriothesley. Coincidentally, it was in 1582 that Henry Wriothesley became a patron of William Shakespeare. More likely, this is the year that Shakespeare and Bacon made a deal. In 1592, Shakespeare received a large sum of money and bought the second largest house in Stratford. He bought other property as well, traded commodities, was party to lawsuits, and collected taxes. A deal, if made by Shakespeare and Bacon, served them both well. Sir Francis Bacon avoided the executioner's axe, and William Shakespeare became a landowner. The two men could not have been more different. Bacon was educated, worldly, sensitive, and genuinely interested in changing his world. Shakespeare could hardly sign his name, was brash and greedy, and had few qualms about leaving his wife and children. A typical Stratford man might have a working vocabulary of 400 words, while a Cambridge graduate might have one of 4,000 words. The author of the works attributed to Shakespeare had a vocabulary of 20,000 words. A poet by any other name. Why did Bacon pick Shakespeare to front his work? When Bacon studied at Gray's Inn, he was the driving force behind an invisible knighthood called the Order of the Helmet. The members dedicated themselves to an ancient goddess, the Pallas Athena, who is depicted with helmet and spear. Her epithet was the Shaker of the Spear. Shakespeare. Ha! Shaker of the Spear. Meeting a country bumpkin by the name of Shakespeare might have seemed almost divine intervention. Bacon's motto was Occulta Veritas Tempore Patet. Sorry if I butchered that. Meaning, hidden truth comes to light in time. In the last 5 years of his life, notably after the death of Queen Elizabeth, he could be more open in his writings. Notably, he penned his New Atlantis, searching for a peaceful world where royalty ruled as a result of wisdom. Under King James, he also translated what would be called the King James Version of the Bible. In Psalm 46, the 46th word known down from the first verse is shake. The 46th word from the end is spear. He also authored the Silva Silvarum, discussing numerous scientific experiments, including one to preserve documents in mercury and another on creating artificial springs. And we have another picture. Monument to Sir Francis Bacon above his tomb at St. Michael's, St. Albans, England. Okay, it's fairly small, so there we go. Finding Avalon. Yeah. Finding Avalon. England was a latecomer in the rush to colonize the Americas. It was Elizabeth's astrologer, Dr. John Dee, who convinced her she had rights in the New World. While the illustrious John Dee would serve well as a model for a character in The Hobbit, he did convince Elizabeth of the need for a strong navy, as well as of the fact that Arthur's Avalon was indeed America. That's quote-unquote fact. Intellectually, she lived vicariously through her wizard. Dee, a magician and alchemist, wrote about Rosicrucianism and navigation. His estate held 4,000 books and a magic mirror to tell the future. The Queen's adventurous side was lived through the likes of Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh. She sent them to conquer lands, steal treasures, and explore the seven seas. While Elizabeth's life and reign when Elizabeth's life and reign expired, Bacon's status was elevated. He was able to convince King James to become more serious in efforts across the ocean. Bacon made sure that he and his circle were granted lands in the New World. They shared grants in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, gaining additional powers as part of the Virginia Company. With Bacon as Lord Chancellor, the Jamestown settlement was established in Virginia. Named for the Virgin, Queen Elizabeth, the seal of Virginia that has survived to modern times depicts Athena. She is the ruler, complete with helmet and spear, and the land where her wisdom will prevail. Bacon's New Atlantis. There was a great deal of secrecy in the settling of the colonies, which would also serve as a repository of knowledge for those secret societies that grew around Bacon. In an era when Copernicus was afraid to publish his theory that the sun was the center of the universe, Bacon and his circle kept much in secret. The original texts of the plays attributed to Shakespeare might have been just a small part of a secret Masonic / Rosicrucian library. In 1911, Dr. Orville W. Owen, who had spent many years decoding Bacon's ciphers, mounted an expedition to England. Under the Wye River, he expected to find a secret Masonic / Rosicrucian library. A secret vault was found. Unfortunately, it was empty. Obviously, someone had stopped the river's flow long enough to build the vault, and conceivably fill it and empty it again. Employing such hydraulic abilities was nothing new. The body of King Lear had similarly been placed in a vault under the river Soar. The body of Attila was safe under the Busento River in Italy. 9 years later, Burrell Ruth, who had followed Dr. Owen's work, believed the original folio of Bacon's Shakespearean works had been moved to Nova Scotia in the New World. In Mahone Bay, underwater booby traps had been placed by builders adept in the science of hydraulics. Mercury flasks had been found on Oak Island, where the longest treasure search in history was underway. A search has now been in progress for 200 years. More recently, the owners of half of Oak Island have broadened their search to other islands in the bay. Tunnels are believed to connect 2 or more islands, with a spiral staircase leading underground, is said to be on an island near Oak Island. National Treasure. The Virginia Company, established in 1606, was made up of Bacon and his inner circle. Interestingly enough, it included both Virginia and a new colony called Bermuda. The first mention of Bermuda is in The Tempest, a Shakespearean play about a shipwreck on a small island. The Virginia Company would also engineer a place to house its own secrets. Among the first jobs completed at Jamestown was the construction of an underground repository and, over this vault, the first Jamestown church. The vault was used to house documents brought over in 1635. In 1676, the documents were moved to a new vault located in Brutton Parish. The area was known as the Middletown Plantation and later would become Williamsburg. A brick church was built, and 20 feet underneath the vault was placed. This church did not survive, and a newer church, which exists today, is on the Duke of Gloucester Street. It's both a tourist attraction and an Episcopal church. Somewhere under the churchyard lies a spiral staircase leading to the vault. In the 1920s, the Rockefeller Foundation bought much of Williamsburg to create a tourist destination. Oddly enough, it also bought Stratford-on-Avon, which had already become such a destination. The actual site of the Brutton Vault was owned by the Anglican Church and could not be bought. Instead, it was given to the U.S. government. In recent years, a group called Sir Francis Bacon's Sages of the Seventh Seal has sought permission to excavate the site, particularly under a pyramid-shaped structure known as the Bray Monument. Fletcher Richmond, a Baconian scholar, believes that beneath the monument, accessed by the underground spiral staircase, is a vault containing the writings of Bacon and others, writings that may have significant implications for the future. Permission so far has not been granted. Richmond says this is just one of many hidden libraries. For now, they remain hidden. And that is the end of that article, and the end of the reading for tonight. So we've got another article by a different person on Shakespeare. Another one on Francis Bacon, and I believe that ends part 4 of the book. Yes. So next time, Thursday, we will finish part 4 of the book, and we'll be moving on into visionaries and alchemists. So the first one looks like it might be on Nostradamus. So, yeah, that'll get interesting. So, I am just going to call it there, and I will probably do a bit of gaming. I'm not sure yet, but I will see you all then if I do, in probably just a few minutes.